We're so happy you're with us today. This is going to be an amazing masterclass with Nir Eyal. As you all know, he's a best-selling author. He's a teacher and a coach, and he really is at the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. And MIT Technology Review dubbed him the prophet of habit-forming technology. And he's also a role model for all of us in indistractability. So without further ado, let's bring Nir up. And then while we're bringing him up, let's do a quick another icebreaker in the chat, and that's what's one thing that's been distracting you lately? Feel free to drop that in the chat. Lots of good. I'll leave this. Oh, lawyers. Ooh. On NASDAQ. Oh, cute kids. Okay, good. Well, Nir, we're so glad to have you here today. And let's go back to your first book, Hooked.
Sure.
And you really helped peel back the curtain on how tech companies could hijack attention and get people hooked on products to do things they didn't even want to do. So can you walk us through that framework?
Sure. So great to be here, everyone. Hello, I'm calling in from Singapore, which is why I'm a little bit bleary-eyed and have my coffee ready here. So if you see me taking sips here, that's why. It's early morning over here in Singapore. But so my first book, Hooked, was about how to build habit-forming products. And the book wasn't written for the benefit of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I have those examples in the book because I stole their secrets. The goal behind Hooked was not for their benefit. They've known these techniques for a very long time, right? The gaming industry has used these techniques for decades. The idea behind the book was to democratize these techniques so that everyone else could build products and services that are just as sticky, just as engaging, just as habit forming as social media or games might be, so that we can build healthy habits in users' lives. And so that's exactly what's happened. We've seen an explosion of companies using habits for good. So whether that's in the healthcare space with the burgeoning field of health tech and wearable tech, if you can't get people to do the behavior you've designed for them to do, this can have life-threatening consequences. So it's all about building healthy habits. Companies like Fitbod, for example, are profiled in in my book Hooked, that get people hooked to exercise. In the educational field, I've worked with many companies in ed tech. One of them went public not that long ago. Duolingo has used my methodology to get people hooked to learning a language. Kahoot was a product that I was fortunate enough to invest in the team. That's a $4 billion company now. That when I saw them, they were just two guys who had this idea for an app that was using the hook model to get people hooked to online learning. Companies in financial services help people get hooked to saving money. So I want to make sure it's very, very clear. We don't get people hooked in some sinister way. This isn't mind control. This isn't hijacking people's brains. It's not addicting people. No, it's about creating habits, about creating healthy habits in their lives. And so the basis of the hook model is a design pattern that we see repeated time and time again in all sorts of habit-forming products. I'll go through it very, very quickly, but of course, there's a whole book I wrote about it. And the 4 steps of the hook model are the trigger, the action, the reward, and finally, the investment. So the trigger, there are 2 kinds of triggers. We have external triggers. These are the pings, the dings, the rings, all the things in our outside environment that tell us what to do next. Then we have the internal triggers, which are uncomfortable emotional states that we seek. This is actually probably the most important part of the hook model, is understanding what is your customer's internal trigger. Not just their functional need, but their psychological need, whether it's loneliness, boredom, uncertainty, fatigue, anxiety, stress. What is it that you are scratching for them? What itch are you scratching on a frequent enough basis to build a habit around, so that ultimately through successive passes through the hook model, you don't need the external triggers. A habit-forming product people use when they prompt themselves out of habit. So not spammy advertising, not obnoxious messaging that you're sending people, but people are checking the product, they're using the product, engaging with it on their own because of an internal trigger, not an external trigger. Then we have the action phase, which is where the behavior is manifested. This is where the habit itself occurs. Then you have the variable reward phase, which is where there's something that scratches the user's itch and yet leaves them wanting more. And then finally, and just as importantly, is the investment phase, which is very times overlooked in product teams, where we think, well, just give people what they want and that's enough. But to form a habit, we have to make the product better with use. And this is a really revolutionary concept I call stored value. That habit-forming products, the more we interact with them, they appreciate, which is a big difference from physical goods, right? Your clothing, your car, your furniture, they depreciate with wear and tear. Habit forming products, fundamentally, they must appreciate with use. They get better and better the more we interact with them. That's really the hallmark of a habit forming product. So, again, through successive cycles, trigger, action, reward, investment, this is how our preferences are shaped, how our tastes are formed, and how these habits take hold.
Wonderful. And can you clarify on reward? You've said variable rewards are the most motivating. How does that manifest in a product? Because that sounds like you might be disappointing people sometimes. Or
Yeah. So sometimes a product wants to add variability depending on what the internal trigger is. So let's say the internal trigger is boredom, right? Loneliness, for example. Well, in those cases, a product might want to add variability. So we've all heard about gamification, using game-like mechanics in non-gaming environments. I'm not the biggest fan of gamification, to be honest, and what I teach is not gamification. Gamification is one type of variable reward, but it works when the internal trigger is, for example, boredom, right? If I'm bored, then adding variability in the form of points and badges and leaderboards can be very engaging. That's one type of variable reward we can utilize. There's uncertainty around what you might win, right? These games of chance and leveling up. But it's a terrible solution if the problem is not boredom. So where we see gamification fall flat is when the internal trigger is not boredom. So for example, if you're building an enterprise product, which by the way, I work with a lot of enterprise products, because if you think about SaaS products, if you can't get people to keep using your SaaS product, they're going to churn. They're going to stop paying for it. So it's absolutely essential that we form a habit with SaaS products that are bottom up. I've seen gamification tried to be used in corporate settings where the internal trigger is workplace fatigue or anxiety or uncertainty. I don't want your stupid badges and leaderboards. So get them out of my face. And that's where it tends not to work. We call that chocolate covered broccoli. When we serve people something that we think is healthy for them, but they don't really want, so we try and make it delicious by putting chocolate on it, but of course that makes an unholy mess. So we never want to do that. So the right type of internal triggers are the ones that scratch the user's itch. So there's always a connection between the variable reward and the internal trigger. So if the internal trigger is uncertainty, we want to give people assurance. If the internal trigger is loneliness, seeking connection, well, then we have to connect people together. So there are three types of variable rewards. Rewards of the tribe. These are rewards that come from other people. So feeling good because someone else feels good, cooperation, competition. These are called rewards of the tribe. Then we have rewards of the hunt, which is all about the search for material possessions or information rewards. And then we have rewards of the self, which is all about the search for mastery, competency, completion, and control. And so in every habit forming product, you're going to find one or more of these three types of variable rewards.
wow, you've really reduced this to be so actionable. And you teased at something which I think many founders are curious about is how does habit formation differ between consumer products and B2B products?
Yeah, so the line of demarcation is not consumer or enterprise. The line of demarcation is frequent or infrequent. So there are many products that do not need habit forming. So those products that are used infrequently or never, right? Many products that we buy, we don't use. For example, think about car insurance. Okay, you don't use car insurance. You buy it. God forbid if you get an accident, it's there, but it's not something you use habitually. So you don't need to build a habit around it. Think about cybersecurity software, right? You install it, it sits on some server farm somewhere. You don't really need it. You don't do anything with it. It runs in the background. So that's not the kind of product that you need to build a habit around. That requires a sales-driven rather than a product-driven organization. So the kind of product that does need a habit, whether it's enterprise or consumer web, online or offline, is the kind of product that needs to be used with sufficient frequency, or the customer stops using it altogether. So that's really the line of demarcation, frequent or infrequent. And the level of frequency, what we find is that it's really about a week's time or less. That it's very difficult to change a consumer habit if the behavior does not occur within a week's time or less. And of course, the data shows that the more often we interact with a product, the more likely we are to build a habit around it. So, when we know that people check their cell phone screens 150 times a day, the reason that we become so hooked to our devices is because they have incredible habit forming potential because we use them so frequently throughout the day. So the more often you can get people to interact with your product, the more likely you are to form a habit.
Got it. And you talked a little bit about internal triggers, which maybe a product maker can't influence or can't manufacture, but what are some of the triggers that a product designer could, use?
Yeah. So this is one of the most important questions you can ask is what is the internal trigger that your product is addressing? What is that frequently occurring psychological itch? Whether it's boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, stress, anxiety, you've got to be able to articulate that. And everybody on your team needs to know what it is, right? Because if you just stop at the functional need, you don't open your aperture enough in your product design to find the solution to the real problem. So many product teams I work with, particularly those that are led by technical people, they stop at the technical solution. Okay, our product needs to do X, Y, Z, and they're oftentimes a solution looking for the problem. What you need to start is, wait, what is really the problem on a psychological level? That's where you have the most degrees of freedom to solve the problem in creative ways. So it's absolutely critical that you know what your customer's internal trigger is. If you don't know it, you're just hoping to get lucky.
Got it. And are there things that good products do to kind of prompt people's triggers, push people's buttons?
So it's we don't create internal triggers. You're absolutely
Okay.
right. We don't create them. That would be sadistic, right? People what we do in the product design community, what's so wonderful about the work we do is that we get to solve people's pain, right? We get to fix their problems. And so we want to look for that discomfort in their life. And internal triggers are always negative. They're always bad, right? Often get this question of why can't it be something good, right? Well, because if someone is in a balanced state, if they don't have that internal trigger, leave them alone. Right? Don't bother them. So the way we know what differentiates a good external trigger, right? The external triggers are the
Yep.
things in our outside environment from a bad external trigger. What separates spam from a notification that feels like magic is one word. And that one word is context. Context. I'll give you a very quick story. So when I was on a flight, this was before COVID. So when I was on a flight, I remember there was this one flight, it was a transcon flight, and there was a guy sitting in the aisle seat across from me, and he was asleep. Okay, very clear he was sleeping. He had a pillow under his neck, he has a blanket rolled up to his neck, very much passed out. And the flight attendant comes down the aisle and she looks at him and she says, "Sir," and he's sleeping. He doesn't wake up. So she says it louder. She says, "Sir." Again, he doesn't wake up. Now people start to notice. She says it even louder a third time. She says, "Sir," and he wakes up. Says, What is it?" And she says, "Sir, what would you like to drink?" And this is such a great example of what we do to our users and customers all the time. We ping, ding, and ring them on our schedule without considering their schedule. So did that guy want a drink? Yes, he wanted a drink, but not right now, not when he was sleeping. He wants the drink when he's thirsty. So the difference between an external trigger that is responded to, that is appreciated, that people look forward to, is one that has context. And how do we give people context? We send them the external trigger as close as possible to the time they feel the internal trigger. The closer we can couple those things together, when someone feels that internal trigger, they feel that itch, boom, that's when we want to send them the notification to do something about that internal trigger. So not sending it whenever we feel like it, but looking for contextual clues that would allow us to send them these internal triggers when they are most likely to respond when they feel the internal trigger.
Fascinating. Okay, good. Um, you've said that the guiding factor, everything we do, is escaping discomfort. Um, and can you unpack that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a common myth that the seat of human motivation, right? This is a big question, right? Socrates asked this 2,500 years ago. Why do we do what we do? And there's been misinterpretation of the answer that, or flat out wrong answers. And what most people think is that motivation is all about carrots and sticks, right? It's all about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. But if you dig a layer deeper, if you actually look at the neurobiology of motivation, it's not about carrots and sticks. It's not about pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, but rather it's just about one thing. And that one thing is the desire to escape discomfort. That everything you do, even the pursuit of pleasurable sensations is itself psychologically destabilizing. Wanting, craving, desire, lusting for something, that's that itch, right? That the way the brain gets us to do something is not because it feels good, but because of the memory that it felt good. So if we understand this fundamental fact that everything we do is about the desire to escape discomfort, it lets us do two things. One, we can design products and services that cater to these fundamental human needs, that we realize that every product you use, every action you take fundamentally is about the desire to escape discomfort. We call this the homeostatic response, right? It makes total common sense when we think about it biologically, that if the brain says, "Ooh, it's cold outside," you put on a coat. If you're too hot, you take it off. If you are hungry, you feel hunger pangs, so you eat. And if you ate too much, oh, now you're stuffed. You stop eating. So that's called a homeostatic response. And biologically, physiologically, that's very obvious. The same holds true psychologically, right? So when you're lonely, check social media. When you're uncertain, before you scan your brain, what do? You check Google, you Google something. When you're bored, oh, lots of solutions to boredom, right? You check stock prices, sports scores. Oh, let's pay attention to the news so we can worry about somebody's problems 3,000 miles away, so we don't have to think about our own discomfort. So understanding that all human behavior is about the desire to escape discomfort lets us build better products and services. And it also, the second thing it does, it helps us manage our own time and attention. That one of the fundamental lessons I learned in my second book, Indistractable: How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, is that time management is pain management. And I would add money management is pain management. And I would also add weight management is pain management. That all of these things are pain management. We have to understand what are those internal triggers and master them, or they become our masters.
That's an amazing story. And and it sounds like you wrote Indistractable for yourself out of your own kind of need. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how it helped you manage your own psychology or focus?
Sure. Yeah, so I write books for me. I write books not because I know the answer, but because I want the answer. And so when I wrote Hooked, my first book, I didn't set out to write a book. I had this hypothesis that habits would become increasingly important. And so this was back in 2012. I had just sold my second company, and I had some time on my hands, and I wanted to figure out what to do next. And I had this hypothesis that shrink, right, as we went from a desktop, right, big desktop screens, to laptops, to mobile devices, to then wearable devices like the Apple Watch, and now auditory devices like the Amazon Alexa. The smaller the screens got until they're disappearing with the auditory interface.
Right.
Habits become increasingly important. So because if you don't have that screen, right, you don't have as much opportunity for external triggers. It used to be we could get away with a lot sending people these notifications and calls to action on their screens. Well, as the screen got smaller, that opportunity shrank. It got more difficult. So today, if you're not on someone's home screen on their phone and they haven't formed a habit, your app might as well not even exist. They won't remember to use you. So you've got to be able to build that habit. And so I knew that. And I was looking for a book. How do I build habit-forming products? And I didn't find one. So I decided to blog about it and write about it. And then I was invited to teach a class at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and then later at the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford. And then that became what eventually rolled up into my first book, Hooked. So it was really about a problem I had. With Indistractable, it was also a problem that I had. I remember there was one moment in my life that really made me reconsider my relationship with distraction. I was with my daughter one afternoon, and we had this beautiful afternoon planned, and we had this activity book of all these things that dads and daughters could do together. And one of the activities in this book was to ask each other this question. The question was, if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember that question verbatim, but I can't tell you what my daughter said. Because in that moment, I don't remember why, but for whatever reason, I started looking at my phone, and I just had this one quick thing to do. And by the time I looked up from my device, she was gone. She left the room because I was sending a very clear message that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And that's when I decided I need to reconsider my relationship with distraction. Because if I'm honest with you, Anne, it wasn't just with my daughter. It would happen when I would say to myself, oh, today I'm going to exercise. Today I'm going to eat right. But I didn't, and I wouldn't. It would happen when I would sit at my desk and I would say, okay, I'm going to get started on that big project. Here I go. I'm going to start. But yet I would check Slack, email, everything but the thing I said I was going to do in that period of time. And so I decided that if I could have any superpower, I would want the power to be indistractable. That becoming indistractable is the skill of the century, that it is truly how we control our attention, is how we choose our life. And so whether it's physical health, mental health, your work, your relationships, all of these things, this is the macro skill. To do everything you want to do with your day and your life is the ability to control your attention and your time.
Okay, so let's get really practical. You don't want to work out. And what do you do in the moment to make sure you do what you set out to do or what you prioritize?
Yeah. So, Anne, you've been reading my diary because, so I used to be clinically obese.
Oh,
And so I hated exercise for my entire life. I've hated exercise until, and today that's no longer the case. Today I'm going to turn 44 years old in a few days here. And I will tell you, I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm not saying this to brag. This is very hard for me to say, but I have to show you, I have to tell you the evidence. I have a six-pack abs. I've never had that
no
before.
need to show us. This is a
No, I'm not going to show you.
family
I'm definitely not going to show you.
webinar.
But I've never had that before. Why do I tell you this? It's not because I have superior genetics. I don't. It's because I consistently do what I say I'm going to do. Now, one of my life mantras since writing this book is consistency over intensity.
Okay.
Consistency over
Yeah.
intensity. This applies to business. It applies to life. You don't build a business by working real hard for a weekend. You put in the effort day after day after day. When it comes to physical health, don't be a weekend warrior or one of these people who makes a resolution on New Year's Day. You got to follow through and do it every single day. If you want to have great relationships, you can't build a great relationship with your spouse, in an afternoon. You got to put in the work. And so it's consistency over intensity. And so by being able to do that, to simply do what you say you're going to do, is a superpower, and it's changed my life in so many ways. So to your question on what do you do if you need to exercise, right? You tell yourself I'm going to exercise, and you don't do it. So the first step is to master those internal triggers. We talked about those internal triggers when it comes to product design. The same holds true. If all behavior is about a desire to escape discomfort, we have got to have tools in our toolkit that we're ready to use whenever that discomfort rears its ugly head. What does this discomfort look like? The number one reason people don't do what they say they're going to do in every aspect of life is because we don't feel like it, right? I need to go to the gym, but I don't feel like it. I need to do that presentation, but I don't really feel like it, right? It's a feeling. And so once we understand that that is the most common blockage. So, for example, there's research that shows that 90% of the time we get distracted. We tend to think that we get distracted because of things outside of us, the external triggers. Those only account for 10% of the time you get distracted. Is it because of a ping, ding, or ring, right? We tend to blame, oh, I was working on a project, but then my phone rang. That only accounts for 10% of the time that people get distracted. The other 90% of the time that we get distracted, studies find, it's because of an internal trigger. We felt bored, lonely, stressed, anxious, and we are looking for escape from that discomfort. So the first step, whether it's, hey, I put on I said I'm going to exercise, or I said I'm going to be with my family without distraction, or I'm going to work on that big project, whatever the case might be, whatever you're procrastinating on, whatever you're delaying on, if you're not doing it, got to start by mastering the internal triggers. So there's a whole host of tools that we can use to master those internal triggers, those uncomfortable emotional states. If you don't do that, nothing else will work. The second step is to make time for traction. So traction is the opposite of distraction. Okay. Many people think the opposite of distraction is focus. It's not true. The opposite of distraction is traction and distraction. Both words come from the same Latin root, which means to pull. The word is trahare in Latin. It means to pull. And you'll notice that both words end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N. That spells action. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you say you're going to do. Okay, things that you do with intent. So anything you plan to do with your time is traction. Now, it could be exercise. It can also be playing video games. It could be watching a movie. I don't care what it is, as long as it's planned for in advance. The opposite is distraction, anything that pulls you away from what you plan to do. So the second step to becoming indistractable when it comes to exercise is, do you have that on your calendar? And in fact, one of the techniques now that's really taken over. It's amazing. So many people in your audience will know Mark Andreessen, one of the VCs at A16Z at Andreessen Horowitz. And for years, when I was sharing this research around how important it is to have a time box calendar where you plan your day ahead of time, people would say, well, Mark Andreessen says that's a stupid system. And it's true. He did have an article where he said he doesn't plan his time. And I cannot tell you how proud I was when about a year ago, he said that system doesn't work for me anymore. I've gone to time boxing. Yeah. So time boxing is the way to go. That if you're retired or a child, okay, you don't have to do this. But if you're serious about getting the most out of your day, you have got to plan your time. Why? Because you can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. Let me say that again. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So most people go through their day with an open calendar. Oh, maybe a meeting here and an appointment there, but they don't plan the time. And if you don't plan the time, somebody's going to plan it for you. So you've got to plan the time. When are you going to exercise in your case? When are you going to work on that big project? When are you going to be with your kids? When are you going to play video games? All this stuff is fine, but you've got to have that placed on your calendar. And there's a lot you can do in terms of, well, what if I don't control my calendar? Well, there's a lot more we can talk about in terms of what a technique that's called schedule syncing that you can use. We can talk about that as well.
Okay.
The third step is to hack back the external triggers. So when you're about to exercise, you've got to ask yourself, what is it that's pulling me away from exercise? What are the pings and dings and rings? Is it my kids? Is it my work? What is it that's pulling me away in an external trigger? And then finally, the last step is to prevent distraction with pacts. Okay, so let me tell you a very quick anecdote. As I mentioned, I've struggled with my weight my whole life. This is since writing Indistractable, it's the first time that I haven't struggled with my weight. And one of the techniques that I use is called making a pre-commitment. A pre-commitment is when you, in advance, have a box around you, right? A firewall that prevents you from getting distracted. And there's 3 types of these pre-commitments. There's price packs, effort packs, and identity packs. When it comes to exercise, if you want a foolproof way to make sure you exercise after you've done the other 3, master internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, the last step is you make a price pact with yourself. What does a price pact look like? When I started getting into exercise, when I decided, okay, this is something it's part of my values. By the way, I'm not preaching to anybody. If you don't want to exercise, don't exercise. But if it's part of your values, if it's something you want to do with your time and your life, which is something I wanted to do, I decided to take those 3 steps first: master the internal triggers, make time for traction, right? Figure out the feelings, put it on my calendar, make sure there weren't external triggers, and then make a pre-commitment. Now, what does this pre-commitment look like? Every morning, when I go into my dresser, there is a calendar there. And on that calendar is taped a crisp $100 bill. Now, above this calendar, there's a shelf. And on that shelf is a Bic lighter. And every day, as I have done for years now, I have a choice to make. This is called the burn or burn commitment. The burn or burn commitment says that I can either burn some calories any way I want. I can take a walk around the block. I can do some push-ups. I can go for a run. I can go to the gym, any kind of physical activity. And by the way, this is customized to me. You can do it any way you want. My commitment was 6 days a week. I have to do something physical. I can either burn some calories or I have to burn that money. Like literally set it on fire. I can't give it away. I can't spend it. I have to burn it. Now, I've done this for years and I've never burned the money. I've never burned the money. Why? Because I do the push-ups. I take a walk. So that's the last step, that last line of defense. When I think to myself, I can skip today, that pre-commitment with myself, and you can ratchet this up. For example, when I wrote my book Indistractable, I spent 5 years writing it. Why? Because I was so distracted. That's the reason it took me so long. So when I discovered this technique around pre-commitments, I decided to use this. Right, I had to take a taste of my own medicine that I was discovering in the research literature, and so I went to my friend Mark and I said, Mark, if I don't finish my manuscript, was after 4 years of research and it was time to write the darn thing. So I went to Mark and I said, look, Mark, if I don't finish my manuscript by January 1st, I'm going to give you $10,000. That was a hard commitment to make, but I shook his hand and I told him that that's what I would. Now, do you think I gave him the $10,000? Of course not. I kept my $10,000 and I had my finished manuscript. So
well done.
It's a very effective technique. It will get you to do the thing that you say you're going to do. But again, word of warning, it has to come last. Don't go out there and start putting $100 bills everywhere to make sure you do what you don't want to do. You first have to do the other 3 techniques. Very, very important.
Okay. And can we dig into number 1, which is understanding your own feelings? How tactically do you respond when you don't feel like it? Like, what's your self-talk in those cases?
Yeah. So there's over a dozen different techniques that I describe in Indistractable. And the idea here is to have many arrows in your quiver, right? The idea here is that you have all these tools that you can use at your disposal to best deal with those internal triggers, because they come in different flavors and formats, right? Escaping anxiety might feel different than escaping loneliness. So you want to have lots of these tools at your disposal. One of my favorite techniques comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. And this is a technique called the 10-minute rule. And the 10-minute rule says that you can give in to any distraction. Okay, any distraction, whether it's checking email when you really should work on that big project, whether it's that piece of chocolate cake if you're trying to lose weight, whether it's smoking that cigarette, whatever the case might be, you can give in to that distraction. Okay, you're an adult, you can do whatever you want, but not right now. Give in 10 minutes. Why is this technique so effective? The research is showing us that abstinence oftentimes backfires, right? What most people do is to say, no, don't do that, right? And what we know with abstinence is when we tell ourselves not to do something, it elicits what we call psychological reactance, right? When you tell somebody don't do it, instantly they want to do it more. And this is how weird our brains are. This effect happens even when we tell ourselves.
Amazing.
That's how weird our brains are. So when we tell ourselves not to do something, it's like pulling on a rubber band, right? Don't do it. 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 Okay, fine. I'll give in. And when we finally do it, it's like a rubber band. It doesn't go back to where it started. It ricochets across the room, right? And so this is where we're discovering more and more that with behaviors, for example, smoking, turns out smokers, when you survey them, they don't like smoking. They actually think it's disgusting.
Right,
It
sure.
smells bad. They don't like it. So why do they keep smoking? It's not just the nicotine. There's a lot more there. It's actually turns out it's the fact that every time they smoke, they are reinforcing that behavior because they no longer have to tell themselves not to smoke. That by telling themselves, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Okay, now I can do it. It feels relaxing. But nicotine isn't relaxing. It's a stimulant. But smokers will tell you, oh, I smoke because it's relaxing. Well, what they're relaxing from is the discomfort. They no longer have to feel the pain of telling themselves no. Remember, all behaviors are desired to escape discomfort. So the same rules apply to exercise, to the chocolate cake you're trying to avoid, to not checking email, to whatever distraction you have in your life. Don't tell yourself no. Tell yourself not yet. The way we disarm reactance is that we tell ourselves, yeah, I can give into that distraction in just 10 minutes. So, I write every day. Writing is really hard work. I don't know, people tell me, oh, I want to make a writing habit. I don't know what that's about. Writing is never effortless. It's really hard. And all I want to do while I write is Google something or check email or do anything but the task I said I was going to do. So what do? Whenever I feel that internal trigger rearing its ugly head, I'll take out my phone. I set a timer for 10 minutes. I put the phone down, and now I have a choice to make. I can either get back to the task at hand, get back to the writing, or surf the urge. Surfing the urge acknowledges that these emotions, that these internal triggers are like waves. And if we can ride those waves like surfers on a surfboard, we find that they're transitory. They just crest and then they subside. But in the moment, oh, I want it so bad and I'm always going to want it. Well, that's what it feels like, but that's not true. So if you can just ride that sensation, I teach you the script to talk to yourself in a self-compassionate way so that you can just ride that urge for a few minutes. And what you will find is that 9 times out of 10, by the time that timer goes off, you're back at work. You're doing the thing you wanted to do. And so that's a very, very effective technique that over time, the 10-minute rule becomes the 12-minute rule, becomes the 15-minute rule. And what you're doing is that you're proving to yourself that you are indistractable, that you're training that muscle. You're changing this belief that many people have, oh, I'm no good at time management, or this is not who I am, or whatever excuse they provide for themselves. You're proving to yourself, yeah, you can do this. You are indistractable.
Amazing. And do you have any tips for leaders of teams? So these are founders and CEOs to help their teams be less distractible.
Yeah, absolutely. So half of Indistractable is about stuff you can do for yourself, right? These are these 4 big strategies that we talked about earlier that anyone can do for themselves. It's about half the book. The other half of the book is about context that we operate within. So there's a chapter on how to raise indistractable kids. There's a section on how to have indistractable relationships. And there's a big section on how to build an indistractable workplace. Because, you could be indistractable, but if your boss or your employees, right, in this case, if you're a boss of employees and you're constantly calling people up at all time of day or night and you're expecting them to constantly respond, well, then it's going to be very difficult for them to be indistractable. So we have to realize that distraction is a problem of company culture. And I did extensive research on this, and I found that that there's no correlation between how much technology a company uses and their level of distraction. It has nothing to do with the technology they're using. It has to do with the kind of company culture that people operate under. And there's a lot of fascinating research about how devastating it can be to work in a company where people are constantly distracted, where they're constantly expected to be on call all the time. It's very psychologically damaging. So there's 3 things that you can do as a leader to build an indistractable workplace. Number 1 is to give people the psychological safety that they need to bring up problems. Okay, so psychological safety. This is an idea by Amy Edmondson at Harvard, and she talks about how when people can raise their hand and say, "Hey, something's not going well for me. Can we talk about that?" without fear of retribution, without fear of being fired, that's essential for a healthy company culture. So let me tell you, if people can't talk about the problem of distraction, that is the problem, but they can't talk about the problem. And I promise you, in all the companies I worked with, if they can't talk about this problem, there are all kinds of other skeletons in the closet they're not willing to talk about. So it's really, number one, giving people psychological safety to talk about the problem of distraction. Number two, have a place to talk about this problem. So I actually interviewed Slack, which is interesting because that was the second most distracting product when people think about distracting technology. Number one is email. Number two is Slack or some other kind of group messaging service. So it was interesting that Slack, this company that makes this product that people think is so distracting, actually, they're an indistractable company. That if you use Slack on nights and weekends, you are reprimanded. You are told, we don't do that here in Slack, right? That's not what we do. And they use Slack. It's fascinating. They use Slack as a place to talk about this kind of problem. They have a Slack channel called Beef Tweets, which is all about beef you have with the company. And so it's not about, necessarily fixing every problem that people complain about a company, but rather management acknowledges that people are seen. So here's how they do it. They use emoji. So when somebody has a complaint about the company or something that needs room for improvement, management will use the eye emoji to say, yep, we saw that, or a check mark to show, yep, we fixed that. Acknowledging to people that, yep, these problems are something we care about. So that's the second thing, have a forum to talk about the problem. Some companies do this with meetings, for example. They have a group to do this. And the third and perhaps the most important attribute, if you are running a company and you want your people to do their best work, you want to reduce churn, you want people to be able to stick with you over the long term, you have to exemplify what it means to be indistractable. And this is the same advice I give parents, that we can't tell our kids or our colleagues to be indistractable and stay focused and stop getting distracted by all these things when we're not indistractable ourselves. So the idea here is that you have to display what it means to be indistractable. So, culture is like water. It flows downhill. And so people will look to the boss to see what they're doing, right? How responsive are they? And do they respect their own time? And are they able to work with that distraction? And they follow suit. So psychological safety, a place to talk about these issues and exemplify what it means to be indistractable.
Wow, this is amazing. We're going to bring up some folks to the stage in just a minute, but I have one last question, and you're such a font of knowledge, but how should founders or product developers think about retention?
Of users or employees?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I meant of users, products. I'm sorry, jumping back to products. This is just
sure.
a very frequently asked question that we got in advance of this session.
Yeah. So how should they think about user retention? So
yes,
every product, so I've been an angel investor for many years now. I invested in, I think 36 companies by now. And we have 6 unicorns so far, just my own angel investing. So this is, I only invest in habit forming products. That's my sweet spot. And so what I always look for are products that utilize this hook. And so every product I look for always has to be a gem. This came out of Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn. He said that every product has to be a gem. GEM stands for growth, engagement, and monetization. Okay, you need all three. Each is necessary but not sufficient. So growth is about how do you find users? How do you do that in an efficient manner, right? So how do you grow the product? That's a one-time thing. So onboarding people to use your product, that happens once. That doesn't have anything to do with habits, but it's absolutely necessary. Then engagement. The E stands for engagement. Engagement is about how do we bring people back? And that's what Hooked is all about. That's what I specialize in. And then the third part is monetization. So how do we make sure that the cost of acquisition is less than the customer lifetime value so that we can sustain the enterprise? So you always need all three. Engagement, that's what we're talking about here with Hooked. It's just that part. It's not everything, right? It's very, very important. I would argue that it comes before growth. I see this mistake all the time, that there's kind of an ethos in the Valley that, grow at all costs. Everybody wants their product to go viral. And I actually think that, that's a mistake. That first, we want to make sure that people engage with the product, especially if it's a product that if they don't use, they'll churn out, right? So whether it's enterprise software or consumer web, any product that needs to be used or people will stop paying you the monthly fee, it has to be something that creates a habit. So nail that first. because
Yeah.
if you don't, what I see oftentimes is people pour a ton of money into growth, right? They have incredible growth and then no retention,
Right.
right? And that's what
Leaky
we
bucket.
call a leaky bucket business. And so remember, you can buy growth. You can always buy growth. You just pay Google, you buy commercials, you pay Facebook. You can buy growth. You cannot buy engagement. Engagement must be designed into the product experience. So how do you do that? Well, you use the hook model we talked about earlier: trigger, action, reward, investment. You do that as early as possible. And then you can also use this model as a diagnostic tool. If people aren't coming back, you look to the hook model to figure out why, which part of the hook model is deficient, and you fix that part.
Super. Okay, well, let's bring up Andy Moat from a company called Gated that is trying to address email overwhelm, and he's got a question for you.
Yeah, hey Nir, nice to
Hey,
meet you.
Andy.
Your concepts on attention have really inspired us. Our manifesto and mission's actually written around it, but we're focused on giving
I'm
users the
honored.
power to control their own attention, started with email. In its simplest form, we ask senders of email to donate to a user's nonprofit to reach their inbox. The concept of challenge and response has been around since Bill Gates talked about it in 2004.
Mm.
We spent a lot of time studying it. I'm curious if you've, in your whole work around distraction and attention, have considered the concept of marginal cost to control access to your attention.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much. I'm honored that you found the work helpful. So thank you so much. I think this has to do with the action phase of the hook model. And this is just a precursory look at what I think your product does. But of course, I
Yeah.
need more detail. But my guess is that there's friction happening between the trigger and the action phase. That the action phase is defined as the simplest behavior done in anticipation of a reward. So what you're doing is you're putting in a speed bump that if you
Yep.
want to send an email to me, you're intentionally putting in effort, right? To slow that down, because now you could argue it's much too easy to send the emails, which is great. But from a product growth perspective, it could be that from cognitive load perspective, what I'm guessing, and again, I know very little about your space, you know way more than I do. My guess is that new users are worried that they might miss important emails. And even though they know they won't get as much spam, I would be curious if maybe the reason they don't initiate, right, other than the usual suspects like price, might be because there's this deep-seated fear that they might miss out on something. That would be my guess. So I think that's where probably I would focus with your product, because email is inherently habit forming, right? It's full of variable rewards. Who wrote you? What's it about? Is it good news? Is it bad news? You've got plenty of variable rewards. You've got plenty of investment there. I'm wondering if maybe the action phase might be deficient.
You nailed one of the two core fears that we've spent a lot of time solving. So it's super spot on
Oh,
with
good.
very little prep. So thank you.
I wish I could tell you the solution. I don't know the solution, but at least we can diagnose the problem.
It's interesting. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Really appreciate
Okay.
it.
Thanks, Andy. And another question, Nir, is how do you run short-term and large scale behavior change experiments?
Okay. So now we're into the nitty gritty of how do we actually do this. So the state of the art today is cohort analysis. It used to be we had all kinds of funky metrics around DAO over MAU and things like that. Not very good metrics. We've had to kind of revise what metrics matter and which don't. I'm not a big fan of DAO over MAU anymore. What really matters is cohort analysis. And thankfully, there are lots of tools. I happen to be affiliated with Amplitude, which is a product that does this, but there's other competitors out there that do similar stuff. It's really about comparing one cohort of users before a particular feature is rolled out with the next cohort of users that do have that feature. So what we're going to do is look at the hook model, make some hypotheses, right? The hook model, the point of the hook model is to generate hypotheses. What could we try? What could we test to see whether we could increase? This is the most important metric, the percentage of habituated users. That should be your North Star metric from an engagement perspective, the percentage of habituated users. What does that mean? What percentage of my user base can I reasonably call habituated? Well, how do I know how to call them habituated? Only you can decide that. So some products, to be habituated, you might use once a week, right? Let's say you're a host on Airbnb. Okay, about once a week. If you don't use Airbnb about once a week, you're probably not hooked to being an Airbnb host. But some products you got to use every day, right? Product like Slack, you better use it every day or you're probably not hooked to it. So you have to decide how often would a user interact with the product for them to be habituated. Then we look at what percentage of our user base is that, right? What percentage of our user base is using it 3 times a week, once a day, whatever the proper metric would be for your specific product. Then we do cohort analysis to see, hey, we had this hypothesis. Hey, we're going to fix the action phase, the variable reward, the investment phase, whatever it is. We're going to come up with some new hypotheses, change the user experience, and then compare one cohort, a percentage of habituated users, to the next cohort.
Great. Abhish, thank you so much for the good question. Did that make sense to you? Oh, it's ruthless technology here at Village. And let's see, is Brent coming up? Is Brent able to come up? If not, I might ask his question. Okay, so Brent asks, how do you think about the role of other people, community, and accountability, as we see, for example, in AA, to support behavior change?
Yeah, so this is huge. So remember I said about the 3 pre-commitments, the 3 types of pacts you can make. There's price pacts, which is, we gave the example of the $100 bill or the $10,000 bet. That's a price pact with some economic disincentive to going off track. Then there's an effort pact, which is where there's some bit of work in between you and the distraction. And then the third type of pact is what we call an identity pact. And this is arguably the most powerful of the 3. The identity pact says that when we have a moniker, when we have a name by which we call ourselves, some kind of identity we use to describe ourselves, we become much more likely to follow through on our values. So this comes from the psychology of religion, that when someone says that they're a devout Muslim, or whatever the case might be, there are certain behaviors they will and won't do based on that identity, for example. So a devout Muslim, they don't have to debate whether they're going to drink alcohol. A devout Muslim doesn't drink alcohol. It's who they are. A vegetarian doesn't wake up in the morning and say, ooh, I wonder if I should have a bacon sandwich for breakfast. No, a vegetarian does not eat meat. It is who they are. They have a moniker. And this is why Indistractable is titled Indistractable. Indistractable is meant to sound like that superpower, right, that I was discussing with my daughter. The superpower sounds like indestructible, right? It's a made-up word. I made it up.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great word.
So it's supposed to sound like that identity. So you don't have to read the book. If you've heard me talk for this long here, you can call yourself Indistractable. It is who you are. So having that moniker, and to the question, preaching it to others, has been shown to make it more likely that you stick with that identity. So the reason that every major religion has proselytizing embedded into the religion is not just to bring new members into the fold, right? It's also to reinforce the identity of the follower, right? There's that joke, I'll make fun of people who are keto, right? How do you know someone's keto? Don't worry, they'll tell you. Right. And you add whatever you want, right? Add whatever identity. And that's very true, that when you have an identity that you follow and you tell others about it, you become more likely to do that yourself. And so the example that I always give is, I remember when I grew up, when I was a kid, we had ashtrays in our home. And this was very common. Growing up in the 1980s, sure. Everybody who's like born after the year 1990 is never going to understand this. But back in the day, everybody had ashtrays in their living room. Everybody did, even if you didn't smoke, because back then people expected to come to your home and smoke a cigarette if they so pleased. That's just what people did. Until one day in my household, my mom threw away the ashtrays. And when one of her friends came over and took out a pack of cigarettes and was about to light a cigarette, she says, oh, I'm sorry. We are non-smokers. If you'd like to smoke, if you'd kindly go outside. And at the time, that was, what? You're going to make me go outside? Today, can you imagine if someone came into your home and smoked a cigarette? That would be ridiculous. What happened today? Why? Did we change some kind of law that says you can't smoke in someone's private residence? No. We changed our norms. We changed our identity, right? My mom became a non-smoker, even though she never smoked. Now there's a word for it. There's an identity. There's a moniker. So this is what we have to become to be indistractable. Is to say, you know what? I don't return every text message within 30 seconds. That's not who I am. I'm indistractable. And yeah, you know what? I block off time in my day to work without distraction. Is this any more unusual than someone who has a specific diet or a religious garb? No, it's your identity. It's who you are. And so this is, I think, truly how we're going to change the world, is to make it okay to be indistractable by telling others this is who we are.
Wonderful. Okay. Can we bring Alex up? And, you know, your comment was reminding me of a recent New York Times article about people wearing shoes in people's houses. I don't know if you saw that, but basically, anyway. Alex, you have a question?
That is a thing in my house. And my parents, being from Argentina, would always wear shoes in the house. And people would be like, what are you doing? My question is, number one, this is great. we are Answerable, a Village Global company, and we're building a new social commerce platform backed with this idea of everybody's a creator, but not everybody's given attribution for their knowledge and their skills. There's a whole bunch of talk around DAOs and this promise of NFTs and identity. And I just put into the Slack channel your hook model just reinforced for the team. Do you feel that this notion of DAOs and giving ownership to the community as you build your product and your platform kind of manifest what you're talking about?
Absolutely. I think there definitely is something there. So the most powerful, if I was to stack rank the 3 types of variable rewards of the tribe, hunt, and self, I would put tribe at the top. That the longest lasting variable rewards are variable rewards that come from other people. And the best evidence of this is gameplay. We think about, I want to make my product as engaging as a game. But if you think about it, it's a terrible example because most games people don't play for very long. When was the last time you played Pac-Man? Right? Or Angry Birds or a Farmville, there's always the game du jour that everybody's playing. What was it? Among Us, right? During the pandemic, everybody's playing Among Us. Now it's Wordle. Now there's this fad of a game that kind of comes and goes because many of these games we play in isolation. We don't play with other people. Right. That if it's the games that have that element of variability that come from other people in a rich way, right? That if you play Among Us once, twice, 3 times, there's not that much to find out about your friends, right? The variable rewards kind of go away. Whereas if you think about social media or even games like World of Warcraft, where you play in a guild, right? Where it's about your fellow members of the game and your friends are evolving and changing. They're doing things. There's something interesting about them that keeps you engaged. That becomes a much stickier variable reward. So rewards of the tribe are the longest lasting, much more than just giving people points or other types of variable rewards. They're good too. They can be utilized, but for sure, variable rewards of the tribe are the most powerful. So in a DAO type structure, if you can lean into that ability of people using the product for a mission, to build a business, to change the world in some kind of helpful way, but along the way, they're building this community of friends. What you're doing is leaning into this fundamental need that we all have to be understood and to understand others. And so you might come for the mission, but stay for the tribe. And that becomes a very long lasting and potentially sticky type of hook.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of the people that we are talking to actually are former Yelpers, and we talk about the Yelp Elite Squad.
Yes.
It was never clear how you got into the Yelp Elite Squad, but you had to eat a lot of sushi in San Francisco and compete against a lot of people to be part of that tribe. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good question.
Great. And let's bring up Kai.
Sure. Nir, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm Kai, CEO of Ride Belay. We also have Daniel on here. He's thrilled to be listening to this chat. So our product is a little funny because we ensure your income as a gig worker during specific times that you have to schedule bi-weekly. But at the same time, given that we're an insurance product, we don't want you to think about us. So we desire passiveness in how you approach our product, but we require a habit to be formed in how you engage with our product because variance, blah, 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 makes it that we can't be too subscription-like in our business model. So what have you seen work for other businesses that want to be invisible to their users, but also require their users to build habits?
So what do you need people to actually do habitually?
We need them to set a schedule, receive a quote, accept it, and then forget about us. But they have to do this quite often.
How often?
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks. So they have to set their work schedule for the next 2 weeks?
That's right.
And is there, so the definition of a habit is a behavior done with little or no conscious thought. Is it something that you can make almost effortless, something that you can pre-populate and maybe they change a little thing here and there that you can make it very, very easy to do?
We've discussed that. We've discussed, for example, something where you can press 1 on an SMS that gets sent to you to make your last schedule recurring.
Yeah.
Things like that.
So if I do that, so let's see if we can make a quick hook here out of this example. So the internal trigger is uncertainty about my income. Would that be accurate? Tell me if I may just be shooting in the dark here, right? Uncertainty.
Yeah,
Okay. So
it's fear of payday loans. yeah, you have the idea.
Okay, great. So that's a great internal trigger, right? Does it occur frequently? Heck yeah. Is it high valence? Do people really feel that? Yeah, they do. So that meets the criteria of frequency and valence. So that's great. The action is to go into this dashboard and look at the pre-populated schedule we've sent you, or maybe it's opening up the SMS message that shows you what your schedule looks like.
Either one is fine because the SMS takes you to the app.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So something around basically open is the habit. Open this with little or no conscious thought.
Yeah.
The variable reward is, well, did you do my schedule correctly? Right. There's variability around the information you're showing people. Right. Did the AI or whatever get it right? Is there a money component as well that they would see?
Yeah. We guarantee them a certain amount of money, and we also charge them a certain amount for that guarantee.
Okay. Great. So that's, and then that changes every 2 weeks whenever they do this.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's fantastic, right? Anytime there's variability there, that there, and money is a great one. This is why people day trade on Robinhood or whatever. It's a great way to lose money, but people day trade because there's variability, there's fluctuation in the stock market. So when there is a variable reward of some kind of financial, any number that changes, whether it's on a dashboard or stock market, whatever, that can be used as the variable reward phase. And now the investment is confirming that that's correct. Would that be right? After I see the schedule you've made for me,
That sounds great. Yeah, I mean, you're basically switching it from you enter your schedule to we enter your schedule. You tell us if we did a good job, if we did right by you.
Right. So we always want to default as much as possible to getting the user to do the least amount of work we can. If we, ideally, if they did nothing, that's actually great. But you still sounds like you need that confirmation. So as opposed to, I think what was the first take of let's make the confirm the calendar, then get the reward. I would actually make it open is the action. The variable reward is seeing the calendar and seeing your payout and what you owe. The investment phase of the hook is confirming, yep, that's wrong, but this is right. Okay, go. So that becomes the investment. And that sounds like something you can do with little or no conscious thought. And the fact that it's a money-driven behavior that's going to be super high valence, you might actually get away with not doing it every week. It might be something that people remember to do every 2 weeks.
Wonderful. Well, I hate to cut it off, but I want to be sensitive to time. So thank you so much, Kai. And then Nir, all I can say is it seems like your advice is worth taking because you've backed 6 unicorns, you have 6-pack abs, and you've sold 2 companies. And I don't know, we all
I feel vulnerable right now. I feel like
no, we all really appreciate all the insights and the indistractability. Is there anything this village can do for you for your next projects, or anything that's top of mind for you that we can help on?
I really appreciate it. I'm always on the hunt for great companies that use the hook model. So if you find that you have the hook model at the core of your business and, habits are an important part, please reach out. I'll put here my email in the chat if anybody.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. So there's my email. Hopefully you can see that. And of course, reach out if I could be helpful. And stay indistractable, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.